Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hey, folks, welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show. And my name is Avrum Rosensweig. I'm delighted to be here with you. Thank you so much for joining us. I just really want to emphasize that this show is all about patting humankind on the back. It's all about recognizing the beauty that we share amongst us on this earth at this time in history. And I reiterate this over and over and over again because I really want to illuminate your life, my life, as much as I possibly can, because I believe in all of my heart that that is a road to peace. That if we recognize the beauty that lies around us and within us, the gift that we have personally in order to make this world rock, I think that that is a wonderful road to unity and to bringing people together and to recognize who other people are and their brilliance. So essentially, I started up the Avrum Rosensweig Show to pay homage to humankind, and I do that through inspirational interviews. Now, today with us, I think this is inspiration of inspiration. My dear friend Irwin Elman is with us. How are you, Irwin?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Avrum.
Oh, it's an honor, my friend. It's an honor. Let me tell you a little bit about Irwin, and then we'll dive right into this dialogue. He is the Officer of the Order of Canada, a senior fellow with Laidlaw Foundation, President, Defense for Children International, the Canadian advisor for Mykola Kuleba, a Ukrainian child rights advocate, a real big deal in our world. Works for Save the Ukraine strategic. He's a strategic advisor, and he is the former and one and only Ontario provincial advocate for children and youth. So that's a mouthful. And let's really parse it out and try to find out who Irwin Elman is. So, Irwin, once again, thank you for joining us. And
Thanks for having me.
How are you keeping? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's a great, beautiful day. We're having great fall weather, and it's a pleasure to be with you again.
Do you drive up north here in Ontario to take a look at the changing color of the leaves?
We have. I haven't done that for a while. Not this year. Although we're going to. My wife and I are going to go to. You know where Sandbanks is,
Yeah.
Picton, Prince Edward. We have an Airbnb we just rented for next weekend, so we're looking forward to that for sure.
Are you the type of person, Irwin, who, when you look at the beauty of nature, as in this season, the fall, some people call it the autumn, are you speechless, or is it a really big deal to you, all those different colors?
Mm. It is. Oh, you said you wanted to get to know me. I'm pretty honest, so I think that my wife would say, "You people think you're so caring and outgoing. That your ego as big as I don't know the Rocky Mountains, and so everything is about you. So when I look at the fall,
Yeah.
I think about what it when you said that I think about what it does to me. So I think, whoa, like I just said, what lovely weather. I like it's everything is I like this time of year. Oh, I love looking at the. I don't think about everything else. That's so I almost just being honest. I almost and it's a big secret. So yeah, like I say, you can't tell anybody. But I
Well,
almost always start, and I even now tell people, if you want to get to me, everything's about me. So I start everything with what's Irwin think? What's this mean to Irwin? And I move out from there. And I used to have an HR person who was my staff who told me, Irwin, the thing you have to remember, even in your work, is the first thing people do. I don't know if this is true. What's true about me is they'd say, what does it mean for me? And once you figure out the what does it mean for me, and you you talk to them about that, you can move what does it mean for people, other people that they care about, people that they don't even know, the world, what does it mean? But she said everybody always starts with what does it mean for me. Do you think that's true?
I mean, I think that's reasonable. I'm not much for the concept of altruism. I think everything does start with us. And I'll be honest with you, Irwin, because of the work that you've done on behalf of children throughout the world, I'm okay with it starting at that point of, let's call it selfishness of I, because the extension of it is so special. And it's those individuals who stop at I. They start at I and they stop at I. Those are the ones we have to be a little bit suspect of, I think.
And maybe, okay, well, I've thought about it a lot. Even back in the day, I thought, because people would challenge me and challenge others. What's the point of doing good? What's the point of trying to do good? And and they argued that, well, doing good, people who do good, it's really selfish. It's really about them because they want to feel better. And at some point, of course, how do you fight that? And everybody's different. So how do you decide whether that? At some point, I said, okay, so what? Yeah, who doesn't want to feel good? Okay, so we should do good. And maybe the idea, I think of Trump, the idea of being sort of knowing yourself first and understanding why you do things, um, is a good point, because if obviously politicians, and I hate, I don't mean it bipartisan, but politicians like Trump are obviously focused on themselves. If they knew that, if they were self-aware, maybe that might be helpful. If And self-aware doesn't mean stop thinking it. Oh, I figured it out. I know who I am. Self-aware means being in struggle. So if you're struggling, always to think about yourself, why you're doing what you're doing. That's a good place to start, too. Maybe.
You know, I'm in agreement with you. I often think of the story of Abraham and Sarah in the Bible.
Uh huh.
Have you studied the Bible at all?
No,
You're not a good Jew, are you?
Some would say.
I'm just messing with you, Irwin.
I'm sure there's other Jews that might say, "Yeah, we get it, Irwin."
I'm just messing with you, Irwin.
I
But
know.
the story of Sarah and Abraham, that is Abraham has circumcision, and on the third day God comes to visit him. And when God comes to visit him, there are three strangers walking in front of his tent, and he says to God, "Excuse me, I got to run because I got to take care of these three strangers." And
Yeah,
the message that we take away from that is that care for humankind is much more important than our relationship with God, at least at that moment. In other words, care for people, right? You're here on earth. If someone is in need, go out and help them. But the thing that I always wondered about that story was, and I apply it to social workers today in particular, is did they have a powerful need to help? And to what extent did that play out in their soul? Like we all know, again, I'll use social workers as an example, who are driven by their own needs to do good or their own needs to help. And sometimes they get in the way of themselves.
absolutely. You get things. Well, I know you would know this from your professional career in the day. It causes problems, right? If they get in a way in themselves, they make bad decisions,
Yeah.
um, and they're actually making decisions about themselves and not uh, with and for someone else. So it causes real problems sometimes. But wait,
Irwin,
I was going to ask you. So I was thinking what you just said earlier.
yeah.
But isn't okay? I remember I'm not a scholar, but isn't doing quote quote good a manifestation of God?
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently it is. We like to
So
think.
if it is, and you're doing good, and you're trying to do good, and you're living your life that way, aren't you? Whether you are a scholar or not, living the way God wanted you to live.
I would make that argument. Yes. I think it's a really good
Oh,
argument. Yeah. And I think
okay.
that's why it's okay that Abraham left God. And I often ask people when I'm teaching, I go, would you leave God? And most people say, no, I wouldn't leave God. But Abraham understood what you're saying, which is chesed, kindness, is a manifestation of godliness. I think it's well said. Yeah.
And wouldn't Abraham say, okay, I know you didn't want to go there, but wouldn't Abraham say, well, I didn't leave God. He's with me. I'm doing God.
Nicely
I
said.
am, yeah.
I'm going to share that in a few weeks on one of my podcasts. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Or maybe that's
Erwin,
a rationalization for being a bad scholar and not knowing what
no, it's a beautiful
religion
thought,
is.
actually. I'm going to share it with
Oh.
my rabbi friends. I like it. Your life is really incredible because, if we can take a human being's bio and sort of shrink it down into a word or a paragraph or a phrase, yours would be children. You have ensconced your life in making the lives of children better. And it's not just in Ontario, it's throughout Canada. And it's not just here, it's in the Ukraine and your affiliations with Japan. How your work has been modeled throughout the world. And when I'm thinking about this interview, or when I'm thinking to myself, why? Why did you choose to do this as opposed to being an engineer and building bridges?
Oh. Well, I guess I thought about fairness, and I don't know what word I used back, when I was young, like grade 6, 5, 6, 7. But I thought about fairness. I think that's the word I would have used. That what I thought was happening to my parents and my family, where we were pretty poor, and when I was really young, we grew up in what we'd call a project now, and one bedroom apartment, and I have a younger 1 year. I had a 1 year old younger sister and a brother who was 6, 7 years older, and we had a one bedroom. So my parents, it must have been a two bedroom. My parents slept in the living room, and my sister had a room, and my brother and I shared a room, and we were in a project. And then my dad was always either losing jobs or getting sick and having to take sick leave, and I remember thinking, this isn't fair. And was a time when my dad got fired because he was sick, and it wasn't fair. I was probably grade 5, 6, and I decided I'm gonna be a lawyer. I don't know why I said that. I'm gonna be a lawyer, and I'm gonna make things fair. Um, and it started there, and as I grew up, uh, and had summer jobs. I worked in a grocery store in a high school every day after school. My um, on Saturdays and Sundays. To That was my community, my workplace, and but when I finished high school, I had to get a. I could have worked at the grocery store, but I had been there for 4 or 5 years, and I thought, if I stay here, I'm gonna be a grocery store manager, and I didn't want to do that because I was getting bored stocking shelves. So I got a job as a day camp assistant. Never worked with kids, and that was it. Really, that's how I got involved with children. Is that I found one, it was fun. I think I could, and it's not stopped, as you probably know. Well, you do know because you know me, but you can maybe your viewers will know by the end of this. I still a kid inside. And so it was fun. And when I thought it was fun and you're being with kids, they kind of have fun with you or trust you, or I don't know, you were able to relate to them and they relate to you. And so that path started just with that decision about being joining a day camp, getting a different job. And I tell young people, even, well, now you're just an old man telling young people, but when I wasn't as old working with young people, I say, you don't know. Like every decision, you don't know where that leads. And everybody knows that. Everybody hears it, open one door, another one. You don't know where I was not in control of the life, right? So I was in control of the decision in the day, and then I didn't know. I didn't have full control over what was going to happen next.
Yeah, and in learning more about you, that question came to mind too. Is Irwin Elman childlike in spirit? Is it possible?
That my wife would agree with.
I know she would. Is it possible to be an Ontario advocate, the one and only for a 10-year period
Yeah.
and essentially working on behalf of children. And your position on that was hearing what they had to say, listening to their needs. And I love the stories you tell, Irwin, in that light about meeting with a kid in a stairwell, right? And I have this image in my head of you sitting there on the stair and this kid, probably a little bit tough because that's where he lived, and you sitting down and talking to him eye to eye, understanding where he's at as a youngster. I mean, is that an accurate image?
Yeah, well, there's a saying in working with young people that you start where they're at.
Yeah.
And that's true in conversation, but it's also true physically, right? You start where they're at. So you've got to be with them, not bring them. That's my thought. I mean, there are useful professions where you bring them in, close the door in your office, and sit down in your chair, cross your legs, and get your notebook out. I guess that's true, but with young people who are the most vulnerable in in anywhere, that's not going to work right away. You have to develop a relationship, and in order to develop a relationship, you have to start where they're at. And yeah, I, you know, when I started working with young people, I worked with I was in my 20s, and I started working with young people in care of children's aid. So they had really difficult pasts and were brought into care of the state because of those difficult pasts, and then living in the state is very difficult. It's unforgiving system. So there got tons of stuff. And I was there, I was in my 20s, and the young people I was working with were getting ready to live on their own. They have to live on their own, like, by the time they're 18, ready or not. And well, I'm just telling you this because, when you start where they're at, what I did was, remember I told you this always about me first. So I said, okay, how am I going to be where they're at? Didn't think of it that way, but I thought, I'm 20. I want them to recognize me as somebody useful to them. So I was used to wear a tie to work in this youth center. I was the only one wearing a tie, none of the staff, nobody would think that was the right thing to do. But I wanted them to know, because I was close to their age.
Yeah.
While I'm close to their age, I was wearing a tie. I'm still somebody who's of substance, right? That, and then as, and they would make fun of my tie. Of course, the youth would tease me about wearing a tie. Um, I didn't care. It made them know I was staff, and it allowed me to be, so I would be the guy who dances in the room because I'm wearing a tie. I can do what I want because they'll never forget I'm staff. And then I had to take the tie off because I was too old to wear a tie, um, because I wanted to be more like them. So now I was the guy who was a provincial advocate who didn't wear a tie. And I did sometimes until when I was the advocate and not a youth worker. You've told me, no, Irwin, you can't dress like that. Like, you can't. One, you're too old to be pretending you're dressing like us. That's ridiculous. And so by then, my persona, as long kids would tell me anything, including things like this. What are you doing, right? You
Yeah.
can't dress like that. You look like it's foolish, which part of my stick. But then they said you need to dress like a tie because you represent our voice.
Mm.
And if you're not being serious and looking serious, then our voice doesn't look serious. And I go, oh, okay, you're right. And so I had to go out and get some suits and know that I was wearing suits. And then in other contexts, when I wasn't with youth, but with ministers or prime ministers or whoever I was with, yeah, I was wearing a suit, but I didn't talk like them. I talk, as you can see, I can't. I never learned how to talk like bureaucrats or pol- politicians. The way I talk is, I often say it's because I'm not that smart, but maybe it's because I spent so long working with youth, so I am more plain spoken, searching for words, tell stories a lot. I talk like a youth. I know how to communicate that way. And so if you're wearing a suit in a big meeting and you're talking like me, it's very disrupting to the people in the meetings. So it's a tool. It's an advocacy tool became.
You know, Jordan Peterson was asked why he dresses so nicely, and he said he started doing that when he was a professor. He was actually under 30 or 30 years old in Harvard, pretty brilliant
Uh-huh.
guy. He said he did it out of respect for his students. And
Well,
what he found, Irwin, was that eventually the kids, the students, started dressing in suits to his lectures.
yeah, I can see it. Well, I certainly get the idea of respect as a sign of respect, right? What I'd say to Jordan Peterson is that you have to do both, I think. You have to be where they're at and demonstrate respect to make the bridge. Because I
Agreed.
don't think, well, I don't know Jordan Peterson. I would never want to debate Jordan Peterson, that's for sure. But it's trying to make the bridge between who you are and where you're at, what stage in life you're at, with who they are and what stage they're at in life, and that both are okay to coexist in the same place.
Uh, in light of the idea that you meet the child or the young person where they're at, I think there's a story that you tell, and you tell many stories. You're a marvelous storyteller, actually. You tell a wonderful story about a youngster that you went to see who couldn't speak.
Oh yeah, you like
He's
that?
lying in bed,
Goodness.
and he's a Montreal Canadiens fan. Tell us that story, Erwin.
Well, the reason I remember lots of things, and that's I can't remember my staff, my wife would say, could you throw us a fact once in a while, a verb, Senator, a verb, like, and because I talk a lot, as you can tell, and is there a number, a stat you can give that makes you, because that's how people think
Yeah.
things are legitimate, right, these days and in the world. And I was never good at collecting facts and numbers, and so stories really resonate with me, and they affect me. That's how I learn things, is through experience and story, and so I think about that when I try and make the point that first of all, children are human beings. It's very hard for me to explain, but children are we you don't stop being a child and start being an adult. It doesn't, and then now you're a different, like your chair stops being a chair and turns into a couch. That's not a chair is a chair, and it changes over time, but it's still a chair, and that's a child is a person, and it's the same person at 6 as it is at 46, except over time it's changed, but it's still a person. And we kind of separate children as different species, and we forget we are the same person we were when we were a child. Although we say, I'm not the same person. Well, of course you're not the same person, because time's passed and things have gone on and you've experienced things, but you are the same person. And it's hard. So I always remember that, and then if you remember that children are human beings and people, then people have rights. In the rights discourse, we're comfortable saying these days, maybe not affording them the rights, but there's such a thing as human rights, and so children have rights and children have a voice, just like humans have a voice. And people have thought, all children, and I was responsible for partnering with children and youth to bring their issues forward, the most vulnerable. That was my job, and the legislation told me exactly those words. That's what you're supposed to do. And children who were disabled, or medically fragile, who couldn't speak, couldn't move, maybe near death. Well, I was supposed to partner with them to bring their issues forward, and I went to this place, Darling Homes, which is a home for medically fragile children. Lots of them, maybe, well, medically fragile children might not have a very long life expectancy usually. And so oftentimes they might be near death. And I was scared, to be honest. Like, that wasn't the group of young people I spent 20, by that time, 20, 30 years working with. And so I was scared, but I had to confront that because I'm supposed to work with, partner with them, represent them. So I went to the home to see, and it was a bit like a hospital, but actually I felt pretty good about going. And when I got there, it felt like anybody who works with kids, but I think it's anything with seniors, with any community, even in stores maybe. If you go in and you go, oh, this is it. This feels good. This is great.
Yeah, you said
There's
it
a
had
feeling.
you said Darlings had the it factor.
It did, yeah. Oh, yeah. I always say that, I guess. Yes, you walk in and people say it feels good. It's
Yeah.
got it.
Or it
You,
feels safe.
yeah. Most people know what. Most of us know what that means when you go somewhere and it feels like it just feels good. Even when you go into somebody's home and you feel comfortable, it's not about what's around you, not only physical stuff. It's the feeling. You can feel it. Feels comfortable, safe,
Yes.
welcoming. So I had that, which was helpful to me because I was frightened. And they gave me a tour, and I came to this bed, this young man, and he couldn't move. He couldn't speak. Uh, yeah, and I can picture, see what I'm doing. I'm picturing the scene, right? I'm picturing him, and I said to the nurse, because it's my job, how do you communicate with him? And he said, "Oh, like by he can move his tongue to to say yes or no, or things remarkable to me. Like I didn't know how to do that." Um, and I saw there was lots of Montreal Canadian stuff around him. Which is why you remember it. I story that because and I used to love the Montreal Canadiens until when, Avram, when did I dislike the Montreal
He
Canadiens?
when they traded PK Subban, you saw
Yeah,
that
that's
that was
right.
racist. You saw it as
I
yeah,
did.
maybe you're right.
Don't get me going.
I won't get you
Yes,
going.
he was
No.
a yeah, because they traded PK because he was a troublemaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then PK. Okay, tangent. But poor PK. What the hell happened to him after he got traded to Montreal from Montreal?
Yeah.
That there's a metaphor in his story, boy. Um, but he was I don't know if he was around then, but I like Montreal Canadiens, and I saw the Montreal Canadiens stuff around this boy's bed, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's pretty performative. How? So I said to the nurse, "How do you know he likes the Montreal Canadiens? Like he can't talk. How do you know that?" And he can't. And she said, "Well, one, wait, I did not ask the question the way I just said it to you. That was my head. I was much nicer and gentler than that. Um, but in my head, I was saying that, and I asked her, and she said, "Well, one, don't worry. When he's upset or happy, he's very able to communicate that
Yeah.
to us, and
Yeah.
he can make. And I got it. He can make noises and threat. He could move some parts of his body and thrash. They knew when he was upset and when he was happy. But she also said, well, we communicate in relationship. And I guess I thought, I had to think, I didn't ask her more, but I certainly thought, what is that? How do you do that? And she said his parents did that, and his parents, who couldn't care for him at home any longer, had him there. And I thought, okay, I like these stories and these things I had. That's what I thought the learning was. So then I'm driving home because this was in near Kitchener, and driving back to Toronto, and I'm thinking about it, of course, and I'm thinking, wait, I thought this kid was like, so the way when I went and saw him, I thought, poor kid. I thought, I wonder how long he's got to live. I thought he's a disabled kid, medically fragile, um, living in a hospital bed. What a difficult life. And that's how I thought of him and I'm thinking, wait a minute. He's a Montreal Canadian fan.
Yeah.
I'm a Montreal Canadian fan. He isn't just a poor kid lying on a hospital bed, is disabled. He's a Montreal Canadian fan. That's another way of understanding. And guess what? That makes him and me the same
Yes.
because we're both Montreal Canadian fans
Yeah.
and we're both in the same club. And and then I thought, wait, that was his voice. Him with all that Montreal Canadian stuff around him was him expressing his voice and telling me, because he just told me something. Hey, you might think I'm in a bed. He wasn't maybe thinking this, but you might think I'm in a bed, but I'm a Montreal Canadian fan. He certainly was telling me that. That's his voice. And so when people, deputy ministers, and I wouldn't be this long telling them this story, but you can imagine, so they'd tell me, Irwin. Because before I left being the advocate, we got it in law that, and not that that's made a difference yet, but it is the law in Ontario. Every child receiving service from the government, no matter what age, must assume capacity, even if they're in darling homes in a bed. Every child has a right to participate in every decision that's made about them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that boy has a right to participate in the decision about end of life, if it came to that. And deputies, you say, how are we going to do that? Like, how do you expect us to do that? Because I would always say, you can't presume capacity. And then I would tell them the story about this boy in Darling Homes. And then I'd say, I don't get paid the big bucks, but don't tell me you can't communicate with that boy.
Mhm.
Don't tell me that because I know you can. It can be done. So it's the law. Start doing it. Figure it out. And that's why he was so important to me.
You know, the relationship that you've established with so many children is, to me, extremely profound. Yeah, if you understand the process and the secrets, if you will, of talking to a young person, then you've opened up doors not only for that child, for that youngster, but for yourself as well. And when you came to visit my staff when I was at Via Hafta, which is a Canadian Jewish humanitarian organization, I asked you a question at that time in that light,
Mm,
and my question to you was: there are children who grow up in extraordinarily dysfunctional homes. I remember one
mm,
particular young girl you spoke of who would wake up and have to put on her own pretty dress, and she would have to make her lunch, walk over her mom who was inebriated and lying on the floor. But she made something of herself. And my question to you at that time, and I reiterate it now, is how does a person who goes through such devastation, such a destructive environment, how do they, there's some of them anyways, actually rise up and actualize their soul, their spirit in a way which gives them a life? How does that process ever happen?
Well, it's, I would say it's different for every person, every child. I think it's possible for every person, every child. So I actually believe that. Um, it, it, it dependent, your life's dependent on circumstance. So, I mean, I'm going on a tangent. I'm not going to go there, but it's important for us to remember, and there's been lots of writing as Jews, like in the Holocaust, like, oh, everybody's going to rise up and do well in life, but there are circumstances that prevent. But that doesn't mean you can't have a good life, and there's writing about that. So I get that when I say every person. But I think it happens in relationship. And so I don't think people can do that alone. It's really difficult. Young people said to be on our own is not mean the same thing as to be alone. And so how do you do that? And in relationship, it's in relationship to you at Vahata did that. I mean, in relationship to each other and community and belonging, whatever that means to somebody. And it's in relationship to, because young people always said, and I've said this, I continue to say this, any study about children or young people, which you could say any study about human beings, all of us, is that if you don't have at least one person in your life, and it's true for children, that you can count on, who knows you, who listens, who accepts you. If you don't feel that that person is there, it's really difficult to rise. And so young people would say that, as it's any study, that's one of the aha study recommendations or findings, as if this is like rocket science, because that's what, when young people would say this, they called it the one person theory, or told me to call it that. They go, it's not rocket science, Irwin. Like, come on, you have to do another study about this to know this. And we would tell deputy ministers and stuff, and I remember, I tell you that, this, the deputy minister, I was with a youth, and the deputy minister said, what do you want me to do with this, Erwin? We can't legislate love, right? It's impossible. So what am I supposed to do with that? And she said, a deputy, that's true. You can't legislate love, but you can legislate the conditions in which love can flourish. Why don't you do that?
Nice.
I thought, oh, ho, ho. I was really thinking that, oh, you say, drop the mic, boom, because he's stunned. He's stunned. What is he going to say to that? And she's right. So how do we make conditions in which what we know, and I'll tell you, if I can go on a little bit, because I think I talk about the one person theory, but where we can make the one person theory happen. How do we create conditions? And it feels like everything we do when we build systems that are supposed to care for children or support families, or almost anything we do these days, feels like it rips at the conditions in which this and I know for some people love is triggering, because kids in care, they say, what is love, and how many people haven't asked that question. So what? Respect, caring, understanding, belonging, use a different word, but everything we do creates conditions that separate us from that. And why don't we build systems, do things in a way that builds that? Oh my gosh, if we could make that project happen. I remember saying to the deputy, what she said's right, and it doesn't actually cost money to do that. And he got me back, because he said, Irwin, everything government does costs money. Maybe not a lot, but it's going to cost something. Okay, fine. It won't cost a lot of money then to make the changes happen that we need to. But we don't even know how to do that yet. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Irwin, I had
Yeah.
I had Miss Babcock as a grade 2 and grade 3 teacher.
Oh, yeah.
And she was that one teacher, I think, in my history, who I would say recognized my spirit. And it meant a lot to me, to the extent that when she left the school, I remember coming home and sobbing on my bed. And I wasn't really aware enough to know why, but I knew I had lost someone really important, because my parents, God bless their souls, they didn't really relate well in terms of not making me feel invisible. It was quite the opposite. They came from that generation. But I love the story that you tell about you were a youngster in school, and you had a teacher who encouraged you to do some sports writing. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, well, Miss Babcock and mine was Mr. Klecky. So I think there's from my experience, asking people these questions about did you have somebody that made a difference in your life? Teachers come up so often. It's
Yeah.
amazing, right? And I'm a teacher by training, so I wanted to be going to teach, but teachers have this opportunity. And even then, if we know that, going back, we rip the way we treat teachers, to what we ask teachers to do, the focus on the 3 R's and marks, and but the not the real the superpower teachers have are to be what Miss Babcock had. She made a difference in your life,
She did.
and she taught you something, I'm quite sure. But what you remember is not, oh, she taught me 2 plus 2. You remember the story you just told, and it stayed with you. You carry it. It's like, whoa, what an opportunity teachers have, and how do we support them to make a positive difference rather than, because some teachers can make a negative difference. Mine, Mr. Klecky, you're right. He grade 5, I think. And I used to like, as you know, I liked hockey, so I made these terrible stories up about hockey, and he told me to write some down, and I would, I would make fun of the players' names, and I don't know, Bert Olmsted was Burnt Almonds, and I thought that was hilarious, and like, it's terrible, terrible, and they were no plot, and I just write them, and he took the story and he took a risk. I'm sure, thinking back of it now, he took a risk, and because I wrote down and give it to him, and he decided to read it in front of the class. And now the risk he took was embarrassing me, right? But
Yeah.
he told the class, used my story as an example of great writing and fiction, and he wanted people, and he told the class in front of everyone what a great writer I was, and he was quite sure I'm going to write a book, which I don't have the um, discipline to do. Uh, and he told the class that he's going to write. He's going to be a writer. He's amazing. You watch him. And it wasn't till university I go, that damn Mr. Klecky. He knew I couldn't write, right? He knew I liked to write. And he knew that I was shy and um, didn't have a lot of confidence, and he was looking for something to to hang, uh, to push me, to encourage me, to
Yeah.
support me, and I'm sure he did it on purpose. And the thing I tell about Miss Babcock and Mr. Klecky and anybody who's watching this, and it, yes, there's often teachers, but I don't want you to think, or anybody watching this think, oh, I have to think of a teacher now. That no, is there somebody who made a difference? I want to tell this quickly. Youth in Care wrote a poem I don't have with me, but and she wrote a poem about, in she was in children's aid care and child protection care, and they have these volunteers who drive them from place to place to place, and they're called volunteer drivers. And uh, the social workers don't have time to take them to this appointment or that doctor's appointment, then back to school or to their ice skating lesson or whatever. So the volunteer drivers do it. And she wrote a poem about her volunteer driver, about the time she was her brought into children's aid care. She was like 17, 16, and her younger sister was like 13, and her mom, who couldn't care for them because she had mental health issues, and whether it was right or not, they were both taken into care, and it was the last time that they were going to see their mom, because her younger sister was getting adopted, and the older one couldn't get adopted, they thought, because she was too old. So they were separating, all three of them. And they had this final meeting, and she called it the longest day, and her volunteer driver drove her there, and then drove her back to school. And the poem was actually about the volunteer driver. And he was, she said, the only one who saw her, who listened to her, and she remembers a volunteer driver who's the only one to say, listen, I know I have to take you back to school, but this was the hardest thing I can think you ever had to do. So I'm here for you. You stay in my car talk to me, do whatever you want. I'm here for you as long as you need me. And she said he was the only one who was there for her that day. And now she wrote this poem in this book, and Miss Babcock and Mr. Kleck, and she's now in her 20s. It was probably 10 years later. And she wrote it because she heard her volunteer driver, who she never really saw again, he died. And she said, I wasn't supposed to care about him because he wasn't important, but he was the only one. And the thing that I think about these people is that, so Miss, I can't speak about Miss Babcock, but you can. Would Mr. Kletke or that volunteer driver, I asked, her name was Wendy, who wrote the poem, asked her, do you think that volunteer driver, if he was alive today, it's like 10 to 15 years later, would he remember you? And she goes, I don't know. He drove me when I was a kid, so maybe, I met him 5, 10 times. Maybe he'd remember me. Yep. I said, okay. Do you think he remembers that one time he drove you on what you called the longest day? Would Mr. Kletke remember Irwin? Now this is like 30 years. 30 years ago. I wish. 50 years ago. Nah, I don't think he would. But let's say he did. Would he remember I wrote these terrible hockey stories? I don't think so. I don't think the volunteer driver would remember Wendy's longest day, but let's say he did. Mr. Kletke, I don't think he's alive. I don't know. No, maybe. I don't know. But he'd be on death's door if he's alive. He'd be very old. That volunteer driver isn't alive, but let's say they were. Do you think Mr. Kletke would think that I'm talking about him and this moment that he changed my life 50 years ago when he wrote that story? Would he think or understand or know I'm talking about him, how he changed my life? With that act? Not a chance in hell. And that volunteer driver would not know Wendy wrote a poem about him, and now she told me the poem, and I'm telling you on your podcast, Avrum, about a poem this volunteer driver's X degrees of separation made in how his action changed a life, changed the world now because I'm telling you the story. Impossible. But it's true. And here's the thing. So that's proof about the one person theory. The other thing that's proof is every single person who has made, that I don't mean made something of themselves, I say overcome, who've moved forward, who've got a path, who've done something, taken action. Everybody, every one of us, when I say students, university students, if you're in this class, you had somebody who made a difference. Who is it? And they don't even know. That's evidence. So when we would talk to the deputy minister, make it happen, because you like evidence-based practice, deputy minister or prime minister. This is evidence-based practice because you are living evidence. You know somebody. You have evidence. It's true. And as the young people say, that long story I just told is not rocket science.
Yeah.
It's obvious. So all we have to do is make it happen. Create the conditions in which that can happen. And be intentional. And last thing, people think, oh, Erwin, how do you care about so many people? Or that this is about caring. Well, it is, but you can't care about everybody. So if you're a teacher or a employer of young people, or you work with young people, or you're a parent, and sometimes you're ticked off at your kids, or you think, I don't care. Young people would say, you don't have to. What you need to be a replacement for caring is curiosity. Be curious. Ask. I wonder what you mean by that. What are you thinking? What's Fortnite? What? I don't know. Be
Yeah, right.
curious.
Right.
And be curious about each individual. And you know what? It's interpreted and actually, just like they say, oh, if you're depressed, smile. Fake it. Because if you pretend and start smiling, it works on depression. Well, curiosity is another way of deciding maybe you don't care. If you're curious, you'll start caring.
It's a beautiful point. And
Well,
you
it's
and I
not
are
mine. It's
we're
not mine. It's young people.
hey, okay. We're all totally in sync, and I've been noticing that. Yeah, you got an
Oh,
Uber. You got an Uber in a few minutes, and
no, I thought you were saying, oh, I'm, it's done. You're wrapping up, I thought, and I thought, is it that late already? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. I know. I want to make sure that we hit your marks here, but I do want to close things off by saying about curiosity. It's a brilliant thought, and I know it's not yours specifically, but I'm happy that you're talking about it on the show. I try that so much with my son. He's now in university. And I say, sweetheart, I understand you got to have to individuate and go do that, go grow up like I did. But I want to be part of your life still. And if you wrote an essay on philosophy, send it to me. I would love to read it. Tell me what you're thinking. All of a sudden, there's this foray in your life into Aristotle and the idea about justice and how we should act as humankind. Tell me what you're thinking. I really want to hear that. And I'll tell you, Irwin, it goes a long way. It goes a
It's
long
okay.
way.
You care. He thinks that. What's he think about that? Oh, my dad cares what I think. He wants
Yeah,
to know what I think. He
exactly.
actually values it.
Yes.
Well, that's what. Well, I don't know that for your son. I'm sure is what he's not. He might not say it or think of it. Maybe he does. That's what love is. My dad. It's a very close step towards. Oh, my
It
dad
is.
loves.
It's interesting, those threads that you are creating. If it's not caring, well, maybe it's curiosity, and that could very well lead to love, and that love can lead to ... But you have to be cognizant of all that stuff. Now, Irwin, I have to make sure that I get you on that Uber because I know
Oh yeah, we're
you're
going to
driving
Ottawa.
some kids from the Ukraine to Ottawa, correct?
Yeah, to meet
Good.
all the leaders of there. It's a person who works with child rights with kids in Ukraine's orphanage system, which he is trying to end. And there's a conference about it's a long story, but Ukraine's children that were taken from Ukraine into Russia by the Russian troops
Yeah, yeah.
and stolen, and so they're meeting all the leaders of the federal party. God knows if there will be any on Monday, because the Monday and Tuesday, with whatever's going on in federal parliament, but we'll be there in a dramatic moment, and they're meeting, trying to say to Canada, and Canada is leading. We need to do something to get these kids back. There's 20,000 of them, so yeah, we're going to Ottawa to do that.
We will have to do a part two because there's so much more to talk about. I want to hear from you about your understanding of Janusz Korczak,
Oh yeah.
um, the great child advocate who did some brilliant things and of which you were a very, very big proponent of. But in order to get you out of here, I want you
Okay.
to know that I've been playing with artificial intelligence, and for the last many shows, I've asked AI ChatGPT to write a poem about my guests. So,
Wow.
so I have a poem here. It's called "Ode to Irwin Elman." You want to hear it?
Okay. You have
Here
to
it is.
send it to me.
I will. It's about you, Irwin Elman. In the heart of a nation, a beacon shines bright. Irwin Elman, advocate, champion of light. With a voice for the voiceless, he stands ever strong in the fight for the children, where all souls belong. From Ontario's halls, he raised up the call for youth and for children he'd never let fall. The dreams and the hopes of those lost in despair, he wove a warm tapestry of kindness and of care. As president of defense, he guards every night. For children in shadows, he brings forth the light. With a vision so clear, he guides with great grace. In the battle for justice, he's first in the race. A senior fellow, a scholar of heart. At Laidlaw Foundation, he plays a key part advising for Ukraine, where hope must arise. He nurtures the wounds with love in his eyes. Through trauma and trial, he stands ever near. A voice for suffering, he banishes fear. With every endeavor, his spirit runs free. Champion of children, inspiring to see So here's to Irwin with gratitude true for the lives that he's touched and the hope that he grew. In the tapestry woven of dreams and of care, his legacy shines, a promise to share.
Wow.
That's for
That's
you.
so sweet. Thank
That's
you, Avrum.
that's for
I'll
you, my
put it on
friend.
my, I'm going to be away tonight. No, I won't have time, but I'll email it to her so she can read
Okay.
it and go, oh my God, I can't believe that AI wrote that. Uh,
Listen,
it's
I
so
have to tell
nice.
you, in conclusion, I've known you for a number of years, but we don't hobnob together. Generally, that's what would develop a relationship. But just from my experiences with you, I have to tell you something. I feel such a sense of safety, like security around you, and I have this incredible feeling of love for you. I really do. Like I want to embrace you and give you a big hug. I have that feeling. Yeah, there you go. There you go. I
Thank
just
you,
think that
Avrum.
our world is so lucky, honestly, to have a person like you, our province, our nation, and now these kids from the Ukraine. You're such a lovely human being, Irwin. And I know you have foibles, and you always point that out to me, and your wife points it out to you.
Yeah.
But you're a beautiful man. You really are. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you to anyone who watches and your audience too. Thank you.
Thank you, Erwin. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for being part of this, for viewing it, and for listening to it. You can do either on Spotify. You can find these interviews, but you can also find them on Podbean and on my channel on YouTube. I would ask you please to subscribe to it. And also, we are always looking for donations in order to make sure that the show can continue and that we can be inspired by so many. So we will be back very shortly. In fact, my next interview is with the ambassador to the United Nations, Canada's
Oh,
ambassador, and that's Bob Ray.
say hi. I know him.
I will send him your regards. He's a
Ask
beautiful
him the
human being.
story about Dad.
About that.
Just say Irwin said to tell the story about Dad being called Dad.
Okay, I will do that.
All
And
right.
until we meet again, folks, as they say in Yiddish, sei gesund. Do you know what that means, Erwin? Sei gesund. It's a
No.
good one for you. It means like go in good health.
Sei
Be
gesehen.
healthy.
Thank you.
There you go. All right, safe trip to Ottawa. Thanks,
Thank
folks. We'll
you. Bye.